Hello everybody and welcome to today's video, a guide to AQA English Literature Paper 2 Section A with specific examples based on an inspector calls. If you're taking your exams in 2024, you'll be answering a question on one of these texts. If you're taking your exams from 2025 onwards, you'll be answering a question on one of these texts. Now the entire Paper 2 exam is 2 hours 15 minutes long and it contains 3 sections and is marked out of 96. You should spend around 45 minutes on Section A, which is worth 34 marks. This is a closed book exam, which means you're not allowed to take copies of your texts in with you. Unlike Paper 1, this question doesn't even give you an extract to look at. You do, however, get 2 questions to choose from in Section A, and you must answer just one of them. The assessment objectives in this section are AO1, 2, 3 and 4, and we'll start with a quick guide to what each of these means related specifically to modern prose and drama. AO1 is all about response to task and text using supporting references. It goes without saying that you need to know your texts inside out. As I've already said, you won't even have an extract from your modern prose or drama text to look at, so make sure you're as familiar as possible with whichever one you're studying. There's no set rule to how many times you should reread your texts, but ideally you should have gone through them multiple times. The most important thing about this exam, and in fact both literature exams, is the idea of response to task, i.e. answering the question. That underpins everything else. Your number one priority in the literature exams is to answer the questions. And that might sound obvious, but time and time again in past exams what we've seen is the number of students who know something very clever about a text and want to force that into their answer no matter what the question is. Or we see students who start off answering the question but drift off into a different topic without realising it. Don't let that be you. Priority number 1 needs to be to answer the question. Ideally, we want to present a conceptualised response, a line of argument which is explored throughout the answer. Rather than an answer made up of disjointed paragraphs, a conceptualised response has one clear line of argument all the way through. Let's look at an example with a question on an inspector calls. How does Priestley explore the importance of social class in an inspector calls? Well, we could write a disjointed answer with lots of different points. Edna's working class and is mistreated by the Burlings. Gerald is upper class and is looked up to by Mr. Burling. Eva was working class and her treatment by those in higher social classes led to her death. And all of those would be accurate points to make, but there's no sense of cohesion or progression in the answer. It would just consist of random isolated points that are basically repeating the same idea time and time again. No, what we're looking for is an overarching line of argument to explore. We want to build an essay rather than just show the same skills time and time again. So maybe we would have something like, Priestley not only critiques the social class system through the experiences and attitudes of his characters, but also illustrates the potential for moral awakening and improvement within the middle and upper classes. And there we have an idea, a concept, which the rest of the answer would explore. And this sentence would work nicely as an introduction too. Whilst there are not necessarily any marks awarded for an introduction in itself, writing a brief opening concept statement like this gives you a structure to write to, and something to keep looking back at to make sure you're not wandering off topic, which as I said earlier is a common mistake. And if we were to work on this idea, we might spend the first half of our answer looking at how Priestley critiques the social class system, and the second half looking at how he illustrates the capacity for improvement within the middle and upper classes. An answer built on this premise then would demonstrate a conceptualised understanding of the text. I'd not be just showing an understanding of characters and plot, but of themes and ideas too. Now the next part of AO1 is about supporting references, and the 2023 exam report once again pointed out that this can be a quotation from the text, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a reference to something that happens in the text, a paraphrase, or a direct quotation. You don't have the text in the exam, so you aren't expected to have memorised everything, which is encouraging. So, for example, in the social class question, you might want to make a reference to the fact that Priestley gives Edna the important task of changing the lighting in the room when the inspector arrives. Priestley could be suggesting through this that it will be the working classes who will deliver the truth to the middle and upper classes. And in the case of Edna changing the lighting, you wouldn't need to have a direct quotation, you could just reference the moment as I've done there. But then you might want to use a direct quotation to analyse how the lighting changes from pink and intimate to brighter and harder. These stage directions, which are part of my quotation song, indicate how Inspector Gould brings with him a harder sort of light, a spotlight of interrogation, which will illuminate the truth. AO2 is an interesting one. Assessment objectives are set by Ofqual and are the same across all GCSE English Literature specifications. The actual assessment objective is analysed language, form and structure, and up until the 2022 exams, the AQA mark scheme did explicitly list analysis of language and form and structure in the top band. But now there's been a helpful tweak to the mark schemes, which refer more broadly to analysis of methods. So what's happened here? Well, a couple of things. Firstly, it comes back to the point I've already made, that your primary objective in these exams is answering the question. AQA don't want anyone to feel they have to include, let's say, a paragraph on structure or a paragraph on form. It's absolutely fine to do that, but, and here's the big important point, only if it actually adds something useful to your answer. And that won't always be the case. So the widening of the mark scheme is there to help students understand that you don't have to write about any one specific method. It's all about bringing relevant methods into your answer. Of course, the assessment objective remains AO2, language, structure and form, so it's never wrong to study these areas, but when we're in the exam, we think first and foremost about answering the question and bringing anything relevant to our answer. And the key word is relevant. It's also important not to have a narrow view of what is meant by AO2. If there were ever some things you weren't sure fit neatly into this assessment objective, like setting or characterization, you needn't worry. If it's relevant to the question, you can write about it. So let's look at some things to do with AO2, but remember this is not an exhaustive list. If there's a method used by the writer and it's relevant to your answer, you can include it in your response. Language is all about a writer's use of words, phrases, and language features for effect. Now, this includes figurative language, such as similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, and that kind of thing, but it's wider than that too. One way I like to look at language analysis is to ask where has the writer used a word or phrase where another one would have been fine, but they seem to have chosen that one for a specific effect. So for example, at the start of an Inspector Calls, Sheila calls Mrs. Burling mummy, and at the end, she calls her mother. So the change from the childish to adult terms of address symbolise that she has grown and matured. Now at first glance, the words mummy and mother might not seem that significant, but clearly they were chosen by Priestley for a specific reason to make a specific point. Structure is about how the text is organised, the order things take place in. Structure analysis is less about what's happening in a text and more about where it's happening and why that's important. In previous videos we looked at Freytag's pyramid, but that doesn't actually apply to 3-act plays like an Inspector Calls, although if you're studying a novel in this section you can apply it, so why not try and map it out to Freytag's pyramid. There are theories on structure for 3-act plays, but I'm not convinced they're helpful for exam answers. However, you can look at structure in a more focused way, even at sentence level. When Burling orders Edna to show him in here, give us some more light, the language and structure of his dialogue is worthy of analysis. As my friend Tom Bryers-Delve points out, these two sentences both start with clear imperatives, show and give, as if Burling expects his orders to be followed instantly. Sentence structure here highlights the pressure on working class women to unhesitatingly obey their middle class employers, even if working conditions are unfair. But as always, we only want to write about this if we can make it relevant to the question. There's no benefit to showing off your knowledge of structure or any other method to the examiner unless it is relevant to your answer. Form means the type of text you're studying, so in section A of paper 2 that's going to be either a play or a novel. It's important to be aware the two are different, so in a play we have an audience, not a reader, and in a play you might think about the use of stage directions to suggest aspects of a character's behaviour. In an Inspector Calls, Priestley's decision to use the form of a play is significant. In Theatre Outlook, he explained how a genuine theatrical audience is not simply an assembly of individuals all reacting as they would in private. Everything is heightened and felt more because in such an audience there is a collective response. He continued, "You on your side cannot fully enjoy what is happening unless you lose your sense of separation from the people all around you, become part of the audience and indeed part of the whole performance, sharing the collective response and experience." So there it is. To Priestley, the form of drama refuses to allow the audience to experience the text in isolation and joins them together collectively. It's a form of literature which breaks down barriers and individualism and forces a collective response, and this of course ties in nicely with the main theme of the text, collective responsibility. Now, with an inspector calls in particular, it might seem that the text offers lots of examples to support any given point, as we seem to learn the same message time and time again through each character, but the key lies in selecting the most compelling evidence to construct a sophisticated argument. For example, imagine you're writing about how Priestley employs dramatic irony to undermine Mr. Burling and, as a result, the capitalist values that he represents. And two examples you might choose from are where Mr. Burling says the Germans don't want war, or how the Titanic is unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. Well, a good point here is to ask yourself which example will allow me to write the most sophisticated analysis I can write, one which is analytical, detailed and exploratory, and I think it would be the second one. You see, with the first we might write something like, Priestley employs dramatic irony to undermine Mr. Burling and as a result the capitalist values he represents. When he says the Germans don't want war, the audience knows this is wrong because the Germans did want war, and so Mr. Burling and what he stands for as a symbol of capitalism is wrong. And this isn't incorrect, but it doesn't go much beyond the surface level meaning. When he says this, we think this. But if we focus on the second quotation, we can write a much more impressive analysis. Something like, Priestley employs dramatic irony to undermine Mr. Burling, and as a result, the capitalist values he represents. The assertion that the Titanic is unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable, employs dramatic irony to a profound effect. Priestley's choice of the word absolutely serves as an intensifier, reinforcing Mr. Burling's staunch belief in the infallibility of human progress and technology, a belief that is symbolic of the era's capitalist ethos. The repetition of unsinkable echoes his hubris and unshakable confidence in the economic system. When history reveals that the Titanic did indeed sink, it retrospectively shatters Mr. Burling's credibility and the capitalist illusion of invulnerability. Priestley's precise use of language here invites a deeper analysis of the inherent flaws within the capitalist ideology, suggesting that its promises are as fragile as the unsinkable Titanic, destined to be undermined by the icebergs of reality. So choosing the second quotation here allows for a much more detailed examination of the effects of methods, which we want to demonstrate to move up the mark scheme. It's fine-grained because it's precise, assessing the text as a construct, looking at why Priestley chose specific words, the symbolic effect, and why he chose the structural device of repetition. So that's always something to consider when I've got a number of options of references to use to back up a point, which will allow me to write in the most detailed, sophisticated way. AO3 is context. The term can be understood in a variety of ways and will vary depending upon which text you're studying. Context can mean when the text was written, when and where the text is set, the literary context and genre, or responses from different audiences. Now obviously, with a play like An Inspector Calls, it is important how it's set in 1912 but was written in 1945. However, context also covers genre, so you might make a point on Priestley's use of inverted detective genre. A traditional detective text contains a detective who questions suspects, analyses the facts, and narrows down from a list of numerous suspects to just one, revealing the criminal. At the same time, the audience enjoys piecing together the chain of events and trying to work out who the culprit is. An Inspector Calls begins with the death of Eva Smith, and the inspector forces the Burlings and Gerald to look back over the events to piece together who's responsible, but Priestley adapts this genre when Inspector Gall reveals that everyone is responsible for the death of Eva Smith. So by challenging the audience's expectations of the genre, Priestley presents his key message of social responsibility and encourages the audience to consider their own actions to others. Now, context is only worth 6 marks for this question, so rather than being a primary focus of your answer, it's much better to drip feed in relevant contextual points. As always, I'll keep going back to it, answering the question is key. Over the past few years, many students have bolted on sections of often irrelevant context, so here's the clue. For every question, ideas about context are seen within the wording of the question itself. Each question has a big idea in it, and by addressing that, you're covering context. context. The 2023 exam report for Paper 1, where the assessment objectives are the same, remember, made a really helpful point here. It stated, and this is a paraphrase, expanding interpretations with depth and nuance is possible by drawing broader connections, yet since this is an exam in English literature rather than history, the primary focus should be on the literary text, making any mention of historical background concise. And I think that's a very useful piece of advice. AO4 is only assessed in the modern prose and drama question in Paper 2. To gain full marks for AO4, you should achieve consistent accuracy in spelling and punctuation, and you must also use sentence structures and vocabulary to clearly express meaning. Giving yourself a few minutes at the end to check through your answer for these things will be helpful, and that extra mark or two could of course make the difference between one grade and the next. Now let's finish by thinking about the fact that you get 2 questions. You are presented with 2 questions, but you only need to answer one, and some people are under the misguided idea that questions will always refer to a character or theme, but that's not the case. As I've gone through in detail when analysing past questions in my Looking for Patterns in Past Papers video, sometimes there will be a question about a character or a key theme, but sometimes there'll be questions about other things like the title or the setting or the ending or any number of things, so don't go into the exam expecting one question to be on character and the other question to be on theme. But which question should you choose? Well, you should think carefully about both questions and not necessarily opt for the one you think is easiest, but consider which one you will be able to write the best answer on. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're faced with these 2 questions for an Inspector Calls. How does Priestley present Sheila as a character who changes during the play? How does Priestley explore the importance of social responsibility in an Inspector Calls? So in this example, our first question is more narrow in that it's focused on just one character, and our second question has more breadth to it. Social responsibility is the key theme of the play, and you could write about pretty much any of the characters. A lot of this comes down to personal preference. Some people like a narrow question as it helps focus your time on the topic. Some like an open question where they can bring in a number of ideas. Why not put a comment in the comments section about which one of these 2 questions you would choose to answer and why? Now there's a full answer to this first question in the 2nd edition of my guide to English literature, which is linked in the description, and if you found this video useful and would like more in the series, please do subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up.